Welcome to Roleplay Cafe. It's Dale here. I'm going to do a recap and reflections from the presenter's seat of Dark Age of Man Beyond the Pale, which we played last night. Now, there was several other games on the docket beforehand, but through player obligation and that those GMs had to pull out. And so the night was just left to me and John, and Dark Age of Man, as has been stated before, is really minimal, if fairly no prep at all needed to initiate. So I took the presenter seat, as John had never played, much to my surprise. So it was a perfect opportunity, and he wasn't shy about doing a solo from his player experience in the game. Some may prefer a party, as it divides up the weight load, but it's pretty intensive whenever you get to one player and you alone are inhabiting the world. And Dark Age of Man, frankly, was first its inception was born out of that fire, as Jason and I did several initial games for practice, and that's what spawned it. So it really sings in the one player and one presenter space. All right. So I asked John what he wanted to be, and he says basically it's a pagan tribal shaman. Well, I say tribal because that's what occurred to me when he was saying this. So I said, look, to make it a little bit varied and different, can we throw you somewhere, since it's one shot, out of Dredgewater at the start? He was up for that, and I said, great. And so I threw him up in Ireland. When he is a bit in media res, I dropped him in a thicketed forest along a roadside, or path side, as it were, in the night, very cloudy, with some oncoming, approaching, seemed men. He had to roll to kind of discern what it was, and it was several, about 6 or 7. It looked like tribal men. He could glean that it was a Celtic language that he recognized, just a slightly different dialect. So he knew that he had lost his way out of his clan's territory into another clan. And I let him know that he had heard rumors and such about his clan abducting other tribal clans and taking them to Dublin to be sold on the carrion trade. And he could draw his own conclusion, suspicion that this might be, something that other clans might do too. So, in other words, he may have had a kernel of fear or not about that possibility being turned around and the shoe being put on the other foot. I have no clue, but that was what was being seen. He saw 2 flickering torchlights, one of them sputtering out on his last leg. The men were harried and discussing and almost pointing blame at one another for losing something and trying to find it. Didn't know where it was, looking over the side, but progressively walking along the path toward him. So, an escapee, what are they looking for? Something that's mobile? Some kind of animal? Object? He can't really discern because he's around the corner of the path and there's an acoustic shadow. What he decides to do is use his spirit to generate some kind of wind to go down and, the basically and blow out their torches. And when he does his little shamanic movements and incantations, the wind kicks up, hurries down almost like a wind tunnel, and picks up. He successfully, the wind pulls their hair back first, and the torches start to sputter and go out, and the one in the lead has the sputtering torch himself, right? So it goes out, and then finally the one behind them goes out, and they stand stock still. And he could John's character, which is yet unnamed, the shaman with no name, hears metal faintly sliding across out of sheaths, and most of them had spears, but there was a couple that had had sheathed weapons of a short sword and around that, and then removing this, also hearing muttered prayers start, and at that moment he's about to, I believe, step out whenever hears or feels rather than hears a vacuum-esque effect with the sound and the rush of wind, and crows, seemingly hundreds of crows, break up and go north out of the tree. Now it is fall time, so he there's a lot of leaves blowing and swirling around too, which I stated whenever the wind tunnel effect happened. He hears cries of men and seemingly going upwards to the sky as weapons clattered to the ground, and he can see there's a break in the moonlight, or in the cloud cover for a little bit more moonlight, and it seems like twisting and turning bodies flying through the air in all directions above the canopy, going upwards with this horde of murder of crows, and then this silence reversal of where there's a vacuum in, it's starting to be a reversal of that flow, the volume of air coming back toward him. With it, the crows come back down as delusion crows just coming in his direction, all out everywhere, as the men, their bodies are flung outward back into the below, into the canopy, through the trees. They're all serrated and cut up. Dismembered, basically. Parts of bodies, torsos, heads, everything is flying through the woods. John had already taken out onto the path and was trying to run down the path. Now, due to a series, during this period of time, I think John rolled 3 -1s. 3 crit failures. So one of the bodies, torso slammed into his back, careened him off the side of the road. He smacked into a tree and slid into the path as he turned around, and he got to watch the bodies in body parts finally hitting different areas, and then the crows just flying past him, and some of them pelting him as they flew through, and all the wind goes by, and with the wind, on the tail end of the wind, this horrific sulfuric smell fills his nostrils up, and then after it passes, it's dead silence, eerily so, and it takes his ears a moment to adjust, and he's sitting there a little bit in shock, and then he finally hears a little babbling brook off in the distance to his right, and he realized, or to his left rather, which was the side he was originally on, and he crossed over while they were approaching, right? So he hears this, and he discerns it could be a river. So he walks over there. It's almost like a minefield of gore, the body parts that he's trying to walk past. He gets to the river, and he does effectively, with a mind check, reconnoiter that it is the river that flows down southwest from his village. So from that, he can coordinate where he is, more or less, and deems that he could follow the river back to his village as it's flowing south, and but it would be an upstream trek if he went into the water. Well, that's exactly what he does. He slips into the water. There's an area where he goes in, and the water he knows is only deep across the whole length of it, maybe about 4 foot that he is aware of. So he walks in, he goes in a couple of foot, and then walks along the side of it, kind of hugging the bank. I'm assuming to secure his scent as well as tracks. And he makes his way along to a little area. Now, some of the embankment had eroded off into the river and exposed some of the larger root systems from the trees on the bank that had gone into the river itself. He hears some creaking, some wood creaking, and silent splashing behind him, very silent. But he's near an area, as luck would have it, to delve in behind or go into a little alcove created by this root system that's coming off the side. Rolls extremely well, but crit success for that matter. So he gets behind it, is able to duck down, and he's totally obscured, and he feels totally obscured and safe as he sees coming to view what looks like some kind of horrific sea creature monster with a head and a large body. But through the moonlight, as I said earlier, the clouds started to break, and it was the river's light reflected back up on it. As it passes, he sees that there's men. When he gets a good view, he had seen the oars splashing into the water and pulling it up before, but he sees the men hunched over. They've got hides on, really stealthy. He sees shields arrayed along the whole side of the length of the vessel of what it is, a boat. That ornamental monstrous head that protrudes from the front of the boat, leading the way, and all of these men along the side have oars and are silently going upstream. He gathered from their countenance and their timed strokes that they were probably the seafarer slavers that he had heard rumors of, that tribesmen were being sold off to, that even his tribe was selling off to, as well as presumably other tribes. They were going upstream, and he reckons towards his village. As they pass, he tries to find an embankment to get up and hurry along to his village, to give the hue and cry, as it were, ring the alarm bells. He can't find a large swath of this area moving forward on this embankment has been kind of torn away, and there's a lot of root systems, so it's hard for him to, inaccessible way for him to reach an embankment. And by the time he does, they've already gone around a corner, and he's lost, certainly out of earshot as well as view. He's lost them. By the time he finds a place where he can get back up onto the land, he starts moving as fast as he can. With a body roll, he does it fairly significantly. He does a large catch up, but as the road parallels the rivers on and off, every time he gets within eye shot of the river heading up to he doesn't see them, right? So he can't. He doesn't know exactly where they are. He can't see or can't hear them. At some point along the path, this shadow from his left blots out any kind of moonlight and kind of cloaks him. It feels like, and it's right before something hits him, and they both tumble to the ground. Does a stabbing poke to him, and he gets a visual on this this thing that hit him, and it is an old, probably 35-year-old, naked, starving, crazed wild man that is screaming for food and food now. He tries to come back to my village, tries to talk that way. The man is out of it. He comes at him and tries to hit him again with the pointed stick and bite into him. John grabs the stick, wrestles it away, and spins him to the side with a crit success. It was odd because there was, I believe, like a 13, right? So there was really good rolls and really bad rolls in this game. But spills him to the side. The man hits and starts sobbing, and he tries to bend down to get at him. And he, through getting a fuller look at him, he sees his skin is all dried and cracked like so much sprinkle paper. And even though he's crying and sobbing, there's really no water. He's totally dehydrated. He's totally like basically a husk of whatever he was. Tries to vomit, just black bile comes up, barely any on the spittle of his thing. And then as he's there trying to help the man, swelling starts in the man's stomach, and it burst open, and entrails, even though it's dry, there's really not any kind of much blood or whatever. Everything's pretty much dried up and hollowed out. Entrails come out, but there's something moving underneath the pile of entrails that's spilled out. He stands up and takes his spear that he hadn't used on the man and stabs down, makes a really good roll, and pinions it to the ground on the side. Through description, this thing seems to be it's cut at some black ichors coming out, and it is black itself as pitch, but it seems to be whenever the sulfuric smell hits his nostrils too. When he pinions it, he calls out for help from his village, hoping that his village is within earshot or someone is around. And a woman breaks through the foliage, runs up to him and asks where he'd been. They had been worried about him and whatnot. And, she was the binder of the babies and whatnot. So he knew her right off. She comes up around the corner. The smell hits her and she sees what's going on. She kind of goes blank, and then she vomits all over the place. He ends up vomiting too. And as he bends over, the shaft moves a little bit, but he does get a glance that this black ichor is made its way 2/4 or 3/4 up the haft of the spear, and his hands on it. Backs away. He gets up and he picks it up, the spear, with this thing on the end, and throws it. But he tries to throw it in the river, but it's a missed throw and clatters against the trees and wraps around it. But this ichor that is stuck to and basically climbing up the haft stretches out with this object on the end, this mutable object, this changing. You know what I mean? I told him about the size of a grapefruit, and it stretches out and it wraps around a tree and hits sideways. It clambers down. Then at that time, when they turn around and they hear the screams start in the village, which when he had turned around, he saw two flickering, he saw some of the flickering lights or fires in his village, and that's when he finally focuses in and realizes he's right on top of his village. But they hear the screams in concert, men and women and everyone. So he tries to get the woman to come along with him. He does so successfully. She seems to be in a bit of a crisis, but they get there to the edge, and he knows that she has like a 9-year-old boy. So she's worried about her son too and what's happening. He had let her know that the slavers of the were headed in that direction. He was following them. He had sighted them on the river, right? So this puts a panic in her. They get to the edge of the clearing for the village and hunker down and see a horrific scene. A lot of these ruddy bearded men and blonde men, tall warriors, have taken out several of the men in the village and have corralled some of the others in the center. Now John's already out. He runs and gets a fishmonger's knife off of beside the dead fishmongers off his little workstation, and he turns around and one of the sea peoples, one of the village the slavers had noticed him, and the one that noticed him was closer to him. So he turns around with a knife and he utters another incantation and Predator's deity and does it successfully. And it springs out as that sea person's about to come down, springs out of his hand, launches right in the throat of this raider, who just gurgles and sputters and spits out, and then he topples over like a timber and lands down on the working station of the fishmonger, and the table flips over him, but it makes a little bit of a clamor, enough so that the young man, the young raider that was binding the people that they were corralling, or his clansmen that was corralling in the center, takes note, and then another raider takes note. This raider looks particularly nasty. He is holding one of the shields that John's character saw on the side of the boat, recognized immediately, as well as the long-poled war axe. And he had already, it's almost like like a trail of death. He had left three other of the clansmen that had tried to fight are laying there spilled out, and he's spattered with blood as he approaches John's character, has his shield and lifts up his sword. Now, John had grabbed the fallen raider's axe himself, and he tries to roll, and the larger raider this time around blocks it, lifts it up, and rends it from his hand, takes it from his hand. So he disarms him. And John's character batters him with the shield, rushes, he gets an excellent hit, topples him down, he falls down. Now, while this raider was approaching him and about right on him, they hear a bellowing horn prolonged call out, and the other raiders had taken notice of it and started gathering up what they had amassed at that point, as far as slaves and whatnot, and grabbing things, and were starting to move in that direction. Now, it was a really powerful horn blast, so there seemed to be some urgency to them gathering up, and there was another one right on the heels of it by the time this raider came down with the axe on top of John's character. I mean, as far as initially, when he blocked John's and then disrupted or disarmed him, but that second blast was cut short. Now, John's character's in the throngs of battle. By the time he rolls another crit success as he hits him with the shield, topples him over, and he takes that shield up over his head and keeps smacking it down on his neck with the intent of just severing at that point. And he keeps going like a madman. He just keeps going at it. And by the time he looks up, he sees his clansmen that were tied together, and they were starting to go down out of the village down the embankment toward the river. He sees and hears the yells that had been previously, but now were intermixed with the sounds of the raiders yelling, and not some necessarily an attack, but other ones from being attacked and being sundered apart, literally, in their body. He looks up, and by that time, they've all gathered into some kind of a shield wall as the people, his clansmen behind him, was taken aback, and they started running, but they're hobbled and they're tripping and they're running. But he sees one. He takes note of one of the raiders that are standing at that shield wall. Something black, some kind of cordal, uh, black, sharp protrusion just goes through the air and slices through and sends the lower shin down to the foot of the warrior, spinning back about 12 foot. He topples over, and there's a gap in the shield wall as he's trying to hold up his shield. The other ones are falling, screaming, everything. John runs over there and tries to cut loose all of of his clansmen. That isn't effective. They've got this fight or flight, panicked, hysterical look in their eyes as they kind of buff it. He works a little bit on one. He recognizes all of them, but it's like they don't recognize him at all. They just want to get away. And in their fear, they do. They're stumbling. They're trying to get away. They knock him over. And then he looks up and sees what's going on with the rest of these raiders as they're being taken. And he hears the last, as he's trying to work on them, the whole, there's a wind behind him that starts to blow. He sees it through the hair of his clansman, through his. He feels it, and they run off. And then there's a couple of smaller body parts that are thrown around him and pelt him. And when he turns around, he sees that where there was an encroaching darkness coming up the embankment that was starting to envelop and thrash at these raiders. He now sees a pile of the raiders thrown off and body parts just thrown everywhere. But the darkness, it seems to be, is receding. It's all quiet now. All the raiders have been silenced. He just hears some of his clansmen running off in the distance. But it's almost like whenever there was a vacuum of wind that had passed him and a humongous sulfuric smell, all of that was pitch black quiet for a moment, and then it turned to where he looked, and that blackness was receding back down to the embankment of the river. He walks over there and peers down, and at the bottom of the embankment to where it met the river, he sees in the shadow, he sees some kind of a shadowy, gaunt figure that has turned and walking into the river. And he calls out that his hunger, this thing's hunger, has hopefully been sated, and he should not come back here again. When he's saying this, it's like the creature turns and looks over pauses, turns and looks over his shoulder, and hears that crinkly paper sound. And then it turns and looks forward and keeps walking, and it disappears either in the river or across the bankment into the shadows. Okay. Now, when we sat down to play this, as always in Dark Age of Man, I'm just drawing from various prompts, and my prompts were really obscure this time around. I was using words that had multiple interpretive meanings. Like when you read it, it could go various ways and give you various impressions. Whether a noun and a verb are just different phonetically sounding words where they have meaning but they're spelled different. Whatever can conjure up in your mind. Everything that was pulled from was that. Now, the first thing I rolled was the most difficult thing on the chart, and or the most dangerous. And that followed him throughout that whole session, and haunted him. I had no clue. Like, for example, after he left and escaped, and then the old wild man hit him, that was based off of a word like dive. And to my mind, something dove out of the trees, and what would naturally be there in that situation. He had a confrontation about it. His luck roll, or his failed critical luck roll, led a further bursting of the man's belly for that object to come out. All of this, you make tangential, logical ties that surprise you as a presenter as you're just giving this information based off of these prompts, but they're not only based off the prompts, but they're based off of critical successes or critical failures. And some of these critical successes or failures are almost like prompts that they could be held till a little bit later on down the line or have some effect, like a butterfly effect, a echoing effect on a larger or more immediate scale. That was what was going on. That is what cultivated and curated that whole session. I still, from playing moment to moment like I do, or presenting moment to moment, I don't have time to preconceive of or presuppose why these things are related. Now, in the moment, I will draw similarities that I know that there's some kind of, according to the roles and according to what happened, that there's some kind of a tangential thread, or how directly or indirectly that this is related to the whole. Because this, you go by feel, and that whole thing, I still do not know what that was. And even the hindsight throwing back, like I just mentioned, that his skin was so raspy, he could like turn it, you could hear it crinkle, which is kind of creepy to me. So that later on fed into this thing that was attacking, that it turned around. So what happened really as a presenter, I don't know, but I could just see it in the moment, uh, transpiring that way. That creature turned around and he hears that same, to John, he hears that same sound. And so there's some kind of a tangential thread to the what happened on the trail with the old man. Was that old man? I still don't know. I do not know. Was he possessed? What was that thing? Was it an offshoot? Was it the thing that was in the river? What had happened before? This thing manifested earlier. There's some things that kind of draw you and make sense of, and some things that may not make much sense. And that is the mystery. If there's a mystery game about Dark Age of Man, is that there's the unknown that you have to play to find out. And that's what we were doing. I still don't know. John could draw his conclusion, and honestly, it's just as valid as any conclusion that I would draw, because I'm playing moment to moment. I'm not setting anything up in dominoes. It's a after the effect. It's a post situation where you look back and you go, wait a minute, I think these are related because of this and that and the other. Now, granted, as a presenter, you play by feel, and something feels similar or akin to, or from something previously happened that makes logical sense of happening, but yet you don't know why. You don't stop and say, well, that wouldn't make sense that this would happen here or there. No, you just go with it. You put it out there, and later on you try to make sense of it as a player. It gives something for the players to make sense of. And honestly, as a presenter, when they're making sense of it, you don't really know why. You do not know why that things are related in that aspect. Anyway, that's just a reminder of the beauty of Dark Age of Man, and I appreciate John playing with me. And hopefully he has a good experience from it, and maybe we can play later. But single player Dark Age of Man with one presenter is the bomb. Y'all take care. We'll see you next time.